All right, so here is our notes on photosynthesis. If you haven't opened up your Cornell Notes template on Google Classroom, please do so now. All right, so let's get started. So photosynthesis, we've been talking about sun and we've been talking about color and we've been talking about energy. So now let's see, what can plants do with that energy from the sun, okay? So our essential question here will be, what are the reactions of photosynthesis, and what do they produce? Well, let's start here, kind of like an overview, okay? So photosynthesis is the process by which autotrophic organisms use light energy to make sugar and oxygen gas from carbon dioxide and water. So you notice it says autotrophic, so autotrophs. That's a huge thing. Those are animals, well, plants, that make their own food. And here's the overall reaction right here. 6 carbohydrates plus 6 waters. Add some light energy and we get sugar and oxygen. Okay, that is the overall reaction. And energy can be transferred from one form to another, as we learned as we talked about it earlier. So we have free energy, which is available for work, and we'll have heat, which is not available for work. So heat is very different from energy, okay? And the sun is the main source of energy for life on Earth, okay? So here's a few basics of photosynthesis. Almost all plants are what we call photosynthetic autotrophs. Autotrophs is our biggest thing, as some bacteria and protists. Autotrophs, big idea here. Autotrophs generate their own organic matter through photosynthesis. So they make their own food, okay? That's why we call them auto. So they're on autopilot and they just make their own food. And sunlight energy is transformed to energy stored in the form of chemical bonds. So remember we talked about how it transfers. Now we're going to take light energy and we're going to see how it turns it into chemical energy, and plants store that, okay? Ingredients and components. What do you need? You need carbon dioxide and you need light. And you're going to need, as you see, some water too. And you're going to make some sugars. And then out comes oxygen and water, okay? So how does this all work together too? Well, as plants are the only ones that can make their own food, they start our whole what we call food chain. And we're going to learn more about food chains in detail next semester. So here we go with our autotrophs. So they're making food. Here's our next level, okay, of they might be heterotrophs. So they eat plants and they might eat animals, but this little guy, little grasshopper, eats a plant. So the energy from the grass goes to the grasshopper. And then this little mole here, he eats the grasshopper. So the energy then flows to here. And then it's eaten, little mousey. Maybe it's a mouse. Yeah, I think it's a mouse. Mouse is eaten by a snake, so then its energy is transferred to the snake. And then the energy is transferred to our eagle because it eats a snake. And then over in that may be just one tiny food chain. Then what we'll learn about next semester too is the food web. So it can be affected. So one animal can affect many different ones. So you can see foxes eat 5 different prey. What eats this type of grass? Well, how many can we count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So herbivores, because herbivores only eat plants, or autotrophs. They do not eat heterotrophs, which are usually our meat eaters. Okay, so this is kind of a insight into what a food web, and we'll study more about that next semester. So why are plants green? Well, we just learned that the color of anything is the color that is reflected. Remember that? So why are plants green? They're green because they do not absorb green light. They actually reflect it. But there's a special pigment in there that causes this. So predict. Answer this for a minute. What range of wavelengths of light does the filament of algae reflect? So this right here, what color is it? That's what it would reflect. So I'll give you a minute. What color does it reflect? Sure hope you said green, because that is what it reflects, okay? And there's a bunch of little what we call pigments inside a leaf that absorb different wavelengths of energy, okay? And so you can see here we have chlorophyll A and B, and we got a couple other that I have a really hard time saying. But you can notice the biggest one we have is this chlorophyll B. And you can see it absorbs every light except green. And that's why plants look green. So here's a couple more of them. I'm going to try to say them. Okay, so chlorophyll A is actually blue-green. That's what it reflects. Only pigment that actually directly participates in photosynthesis. So all these other ones don't actually participate in photosynthesis. They do other things. So we call them the accessory or antennae pigments, okay? They basically absorb light and transfer it to chlorophyll A because it wants to get as much light energy as it can. So chlorophyll B is a yellow-green, okay? Carotenoids, various shades of yellow and orange. Xanthophylls are purples, and anthocyanin is yellow. So you can see some of these are even for fall, that they're more active than the chlorophyll when we get to the fall, as we get to colder weathers, as you guys are seeing now. And that's why we get all these different colors, because some of these pigments are more active at certain times of years than others. So if your green trees are not staying green, it's because your chlorophyll A is not as active as it once was, okay? So what are the parts of the chloroplast? Okay, so we have what we call the thylakoids, which is a flattened sac, pigments of photosynthesis located in the membranes. So it's the outside layer of one piece. So it's almost like a bunch of pancakes, and the thylakoids look like stacked pancakes, okay? And then you have the grana, stacks of thylakoids. So instead of a stack of pancakes, we call it the grana, okay? And the stroma is the inner portions of all this. So this is a little vocabulary for you, okay? All right, so where is the location and structure of the chloroplast? Well, remember when we were looking at the cells, here's the leaf, okay? And we take a cross-section, look under a microscope, and you would see a ton of them. Remember when I showed you the GIF picture before? You had a ton of them. And each one has a bunch of thylakoids. So this is the big picture, a leaf. And then we have a bunch of chloroplasts. And then we have the thylakoid. And that's the one most people would see out and about, right? Oh my gosh. An overview of photosynthesis is the light reactions convert solar energy to chemical energy. So why do we call it the light reactions? Because it requires light. Notice this one does not. So we call these the dark reactions. And they produce what we call ATP and NADPH. And we'll talk a little bit more about those, but I just want you to get those down. I'll tell you what those are later in your vocabulary. Okay? And as soon as the light comes in, this is right here, this is the thylakoids or the grana, because each one of these little pancakes is a thylakoid. And the whole thing together is the grana, okay? And the light comes in, causes the reactions, which we looked at before, to produce ATP and NADPH, which is then taken over here to what we call the dark reactions, or light independent, which means it doesn't need light, Calvin cycle. And it produces sugars, which the plant can use, and it uses carbon dioxide, okay? Here we use water. Okay, so in here, and notice that the light reaction, water comes in and oxygen comes out. I wonder who uses a lot of oxygen. And then ATP is generated by the light reactions, provides the energy for sugar synthesis. So the light reactions provide everything, the energy used to run the Calvin cycle, or the dark reactions. The NADPH produced by the light reactions provides the electrons for the reduction of carbon dioxide to glucose. So just understand that without the light reactions, we would not have the dark reactions either. So the light reactions gets water and light and turns it into oxygen and ATP and NADPH, which goes to the dark cycles, okay? And this requires carbon dioxide and they turn it into sugars. All right, so a little review. The reactants of photosynthesis are carbon dioxide and water, and the driving reaction is the sunlight reaction, or the light dependent, and the products are glucose and oxygen. And sunlight is captured by pigments, chlorophylls, and others, and pigments are located in the chloroplast, okay? So the chloroplast absorb light energy and convert it to chemical energy, just like you saw in the bonds. Okay? And chloroplast is for sure the site of photosynthesis. It only happens in the chloroplast, okay? And they're only in plants. We cannot do photosynthesis. I am not green. You are not green. So that means we have no chloroplasts. All green plants parts have chloroplasts and carry out photosynthesis. And the leaves have the most chloroplast of anything versus the stem, flowers. And the green color comes from the chlorophyll in the chloroplast. And the pigments absorb light energy and reflect only green. Okay. How do they do this? How do they convert it to chemical energy? Well, just so you know, you'll learn more in chemistry, but plants produce oxygen gas by splitting water apart. Water went in, oxygen comes out, okay? And the oxygen liberated by the photosynthesis is made from the oxygen and water, okay? And that's all you really need to know, okay? But here's the big overall reaction, okay? Again, light and water goes into the thylakoids and the grana. Oxygen comes out, ATP and NADPH go over to the Calvin cycle, which takes in carbon dioxide and makes sugar. And this happens in the stroma too. And out comes another molecules of energy, okay, and sugar. So that is the overall photosynthesis reaction. Okay. And again, here's another little summary of how they make their own food. All they need is light and water. Okay. And they can make their own food. And here it is over here, glucose. Okay. So you can see it's not easy being green, but it sure is essential for life on Earth, because without that, we wouldn't have anything to eat, right? Except meat, and the meat that we do eat wouldn't have anything to eat. Not only that, but did you see? Plants make oxygen. Like I said, I wonder who uses that. It's a very delicate balancing act, and we will talk more about this balancing act as we get through photosynthesis and head into cellular respiration. So for now, what I want you to do is go back and highlight any notes that were important to the essential question. Go back and make connections with your notes. Write those in the left column. Go back and add questions you may have in the left column, and write a 3 to 5 sentence summary of these notes. If you have any questions, please let me know.